Welcome back, everybody. Just like Game of Thrones, the podcast you thought was never coming back has finally returned, proving that the sun does shine again. Our 10-month hiatus is finally coming to a close, and I'm so excited to bring you guys new, vibrant content. I'm your host, as always, Javier Thompson, and you are tuned into the Vibrant Sons podcast, where we believe that anything we suppress, we empower to destroy us. So by sharing our stories, we strengthen ourselves, our communities, and our collective future. As the host, my job is to provide you guys with personal interviews and connect you with guests who are unified with our vibrant community in forwarding Black and Brown excellence and lifting the taboo off of conversations centered around mental health. I want to give a very special shout out to all my day one listeners, because if you're still listening and interested in my platform after all this time, I truly love you. You know that I usually say that for the end of the podcast, but if you're listening right now, I want to let you know up front. I also want to shout out to all my new listeners and let you know that we are a welcoming community here, and we're so glad that you decided to join us. So don't hesitate to listen back to all the old episodes to get a fuller picture of what this podcast has done up until now. On this week's episode, I am joined by my long-term friend and long-distance co-host, Geoff Follette. Together, we discuss everything that has been going on since we last potted and everything we have planned for future episodes. We address your many questions like, why haven't we released episodes in so long? And why did you leave Atlanta, Javier? In addition to answering all these whys, we also give you some advice on finding your own why in your life and how beneficial that can be in achieving a meaningful life. This is a jam-packed episode, and I'm ready to share it with you right now.
They are just needing a strength to release their wiggles.
Oh man, how should we even start this off?
I mean, back from the dead for a long time gone, you know?
Yes, sir. Okay, let's get started. Oh my goodness. We're about to have just complete 20 seconds of us just goofing off. Oh man. All right. Yo, what's up, Geoff? How's it going?
My boy Javier. Chilling, man. How you been?
I'm good. I mean, this feels kind of unnatural. We've been away from the mics for quite a long time.
And technically, I'm still away from the mics because we're on the phones right now.
Yeah.
In different states trying to make it connect.
Yeah, man. And this might be what it's like for the time being. We might be a long distance relationship.
Hey, those relationships are always the strongest anyway. So you know, I'm cool with that. We'll survive.
Yeah. But thank you everybody for tuning in. This is the first episode back of the Vibrant Sons podcast, and we have a lot to cover.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely. I think that we've been gone since August, if I'm not mistaken. So that's been almost a full year.
Yeah,
So in this year, a lot has been going on, and I don't want to waste you guys' time, because we did do that Instagram poll on my personal Instagram, and I know you guys don't like to waste too much time here on this Vibrant Sons podcast.
They about the business.
Oh yeah. So I think that we should just get started with hey man, we're back and we're new and improved, right?
Definitely.
I really wish
rebranded.
Yeah, I really wish we had some air horns or something like so let everybody know that this is brand spanking new and that we're new and improved. This is Vibrant Sons 2.0. This podcast has seen a lot of changes in the short time that it's been around. I think most of you guys may be familiar with the podcast when we first referred to it as the platform dedicated to challenging the stereotypes associated with non-traditional families and empowering our communities toward a brighter future. And it still is that. But the podcast, of course, has broadened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were bound to change, though, from the jump. We started out with, a much more central focus on, the the male perspective and growing up without a father. But, you know, first of all, we only knew so many people in that category, but also, you know, the experiences that we've encountered and the experiences that we think would be vital for our listeners to hear has grown so much larger than that. We couldn't cater to just one audience. So, you know, with any change and growth comes new things, and, you know, we're moving in a much bigger direction that's, you know, better for everyone, I think.
Yeah, man. I think after the first episode, we got so many responses from women talking about, we're the women, you know, we want more female stories. Like, right, of course we're going to get there. And inherently, the name of this podcast has a masculine tone to it. But because it started from that place, and I don't ever want to deviate from the place where we began, where, you know, this was all about me confronting my issue of growing up without my father head on and using my experience to inspire the people around me and hopefully to get other people to do the same. But since then, obviously, it's opened up to women. And then from there, it wasn't just women who grew up without their fathers, but it was men and women who grew up without who grew up in a non-traditional family, whether that be their mother or their father, or growing up with their grandparents, and how that may have affected their psyche.
Yeah, the spirit never changed. The spirit started from, you know, wanting to be open and using your own stories to help someone else. Mm-hmm. And now it just, you know, covers more people. That's all it is. So it's still, as long as it's the same spirit, then, you know, we can all be vibrant sons, even if we're women, I guess. Vibrant women, we can just go ahead and change it over. That's fine. But
yeah, I mean, we're all vibrant sons, but some of us are vibrant SONS, but all of us are vibrant SUNS, where, you know, we're all trying to emulate the sun. And I think that was really good. What we did was working in that vibrant philosophy where no matter what, even if you don't come from these type of backgrounds, you know, you may come from a more traditional household. What's is most important is being more like the sun in the sky and being vibrant, because like we've identified in past episodes, is that the sun is the only celestial body in our solar system that gives off light, and everything around it is cold, everything is dark, but that doesn't stop the sun from shining bright and creating life for the planets that surround it. And I want everybody that listens to this podcast to emulate the same thing that the sun is doing, where we're shining no matter what, and creating great opportunities with our words and with our actions in order to create life and opportunities around us for the people that are around us.
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to chime in there?
I agree.
But then that definitely leads us into where we're going in the future. I mean, now I've reached a mission statement, or I think a nice tagline that really encompasses everything that we're doing with this podcast, where this podcast at its core really is trying to attack those stories that we suppress the most or confront them the most. So on this podcast, we personally believe that anything that we suppress, we empower to destroy us. So by sharing our stories, we not only strengthen ourselves, but we strengthen our communities and our collective future. So by sharing our stories and being vulnerable with one another, we create this vibrant community and create a more positive future and outlook for everyone around us.
Mm-hmm. It's like something that Larry said on the episode that we sat in together. You know, everything you do affects someone you love, and even further than that, everything you do affects someone you don't know, I think, especially when it comes to, you know, your own personal story. You know, we all see those commercials where, like, they pass a smile on or whatever, and you know what I mean? Have you seen those commercials? So, like, you know, the smile you gave may affect somebody in a whole other state, and I think even in the Black community, it's something just like that, where we've been kind of, you know, conditioned to say, well, you know, our struggle should be kept silent, you know, let's just act like nothing ever happened and, you know, keep pushing. And, you know, I know the mental health community is, you know, very critical of that in us, and that, you know, Black parenting traditionally does not involve the acknowledgement of proper mental health and taking care of mental health and that kind of thing. And it's kind of just created this cycle of silence and this cycle of you know, not getting better. And the key to, you know, unlocking that is being those first people to say, you know, this is how I feel, this is what's happening, this is where I've been, this is how I'm going to get through it. And not only does that inspire someone else to do it, but it also shows someone else how to do it. And, that's an empowering thing that everyone with a story should feel inclined to do. And I think this new mission statement, like we're saying, it broadens it up. It just opens new doors. It involves more people. It makes it more accessible. It makes it more believable for any person to involve themselves in.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, with making this podcast, I think that we discovered early on that it was bigger than just men sharing their stories of growing up without their fathers, but it was more so exposing how sometimes the people closest to us, we don't communicate with them as well as we think we do, and there's so many things that we don't know about them that we take for granted. Like these are people that I had early on in this podcast, like Chad, Lamar, and some of my close, even family members, my brother, my uncle, that we never had these conversations, and we learned so much about each other and about our families by having these conversations. So by taking on this vibrant mindset of being vulnerable with even the people that you love, it can empower you and strengthen those relationships to the next level.
And I'm sure that there's a part of you that feels like if you'd had some of these conversations sooner in your life, maybe you wouldn't be on a whole different trajectory, but you might have been able to see things differently. You might have been able to move differently. You might have been able to just feel differently about yourself or about others. Like it just would have probably provided some clarity for you. I'm assuming. Is that accurate?
Yeah, those are things that we've touched on previous episodes where, in my own struggle, I felt alone, that I was the only one kind of dealing with this issue, and I suppressed it. And so then this podcast is kind of all about kicking game to those who may feel like they have to suppress their issues, and letting them know that the more that you suppress it, you think that you're hiding these things, but you're really just letting it eat up inside of you and ultimately destroy you and keeping you back from being the best person that you can be. So if I had gotten this out earlier, these conversations, and gotten advice from my friends and been able to relate to them earlier, there's no telling where those conversations could have taken us.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for us, people now that know better, do better, so that way we can, maybe catch that kid was our age and feeling alone himself or herself, and being able to shed light on, hey, you don't have to feel this way, or you don't have to think that you're alone, I should say. Yeah. And we have our own struggles too, and there's commonality with all of us. Even though, and the one thing that I've taken away the most from it, I would say, is that even though my struggle is not the exact same as your struggle, there's something that I can still take away from your struggle for myself. Like I have both my parents in my life, but they're divorced, and I multiplied it. Parents, I got 2 extra parents now because they both remarried. But there's still things that I can take away in terms of how I feel with my parental relationships, or with my peer relationships, with my sibling relationships, with my family relationships in general. Take that away from someone who's been in the situation you have been in, where you don't have a father in your life and you've been kind of chasing the image of a father. We're all chasing different images. We're all just trying to figure things out the same way. We just might be in different situations. So, if I had known I was not alone at certain points in my life, I know for a fact there would be ways that I think now that would not be the same. I would definitely probably be more of a positive person, be more of a outreaching person, be a more thoughtful person, Mm-hmm. And these are the type of people that we need more of in the world, is more people, more thoughtful people, more positive people. These are the type of people that, get good jobs. You know what I mean? These are the type of people that are successful, is those type of people that don't let these situations bog them down. The ability to just rise above whatever you're going through is something that's, very desirable and makes you a leader, a true leader. So it's important that we kind of just, be our own leaders and in turn lead some other people, especially with this podcast.
Yeah, man. And one thing that you touched on earlier was specifically about the Black community. And I know that this may be true for other communities as well, where, we try to keep family business tight, and we try not to share other people in fears of what people might think about our family. And to an extent, that is true, but at the same time, I think that there's some things that we should share in order to help each other. I remember when I first started this podcast, my mom, she was one of the people who was really afraid of me starting this podcast. It was kind of like, I wouldn't say discouraging me, but, telling me, oh, I don't think that it's a good idea. And, we've had these conversations, and telling me that I shouldn't do the podcast, and I had to kind of push through that and say, you know what, I think that what these conversations are is going to do more good than it is going to do harm for our family, for people to kind of for me to share my story. And it proved to be right. Yeah, and my mom now, you know, is one of the bigger supporters of this podcast, and she's proud of everything that I'm doing. So and that's not to put her down or anything like that. I mean, she was fearful, and that is a fear that all of us have, you know, exposing ourselves and being vulnerable. And this podcast is all about, you know, again, taking off that hard exterior and showing that on the inside there's more commonalities than differences. Yeah, that makes me think of another kind of I guess analogy that this whole vibrant sun, SUNS thing brings, is that one thing about this, or two things about the sun, is one is that, like, when the sun is out, you just cannot deny it. Like, when the positivity is out, you know, it may be hard being a fearful person, being misunderstood, being scared, being worried about what's going to happen. It's out there, but, you know, the freedom that comes in the vulnerability, the freedom that comes in the sun shining on it, you know, in a positive way, in a helpful way, is, you know, it's nice and it's welcoming, and it, you know, it continues to empower you. And when the sun is out, you gotta be with the sun. You know what I mean? On a hot day after a long cold winter, and you see the sun is out and the kids are starting to come outside, and you might be able to get on the porch. You're like, man, I gotta get me some lemonade. I gotta be out here. You know, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with this podcast, or, you know, just in general, just having that, you know, that sunny disposition, I guess. And then also on top of that, you know, the sun is a welcoming body. I kind of said that already, but it's very inviting. It's warm. It's friendly. It's something that brings people together. And, you know, it all goes in that vein of when we're out here doing what we're doing, it's supposed to be a loving thing that brings us all together. Yeah. And that's something that we need, I think, just as much as we need the people that go forward with it. We need just to come together. As black people, as, you know, even white people, you know, whoever, anybody struggling, we all need to come together and, you know, reach that commonality with one another. Yeah. And that's why, you know, when we're talking about this podcast, it easily bled into mental health topics and issues within our the black community, and trying to fight these mental stigmas that we already have. And by doing that, you know, I really want to highlight more people who are fighting the same fight as we are, but under, you know, different missions. You know, we're all about inspiring people to be more like the sun and be vibrant within their own lives. But there's other people with their own missions who are doing the same work, you know, like I can immediately think of somebody like Nipsey Hussle. You know, Nipsey Hussle was probably the most vibrant. Yeah. Rest in peace. You know, we really lost a legend recently, and it's hard to talk about. You know, but with Nipsey Hussle, he was probably one of the most vibrant people that we've seen in our communities in a long time. You know, he was doing everything that I think that I hope to inspire other people to do, and he inspired me to kind of return and to be a stronger leader for my own platform. And, you know, Nipsey Hussle may not have came from the same background as me, but he's still a vibrant son, you know, and I want to highlight more people who are doing work like that and be able to and to show off all these people who are fighting these stigmas. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that he passed, but it's amazing how his legacy maybe got stronger when he passed. Like, what he was doing was such a real thing. Like, it's undeniable the effect that he had on the LA community. And, you know, CNN is out here broadcasting his funeral like he's Michael Jackson or something, you know. But his music wasn't like Michael's in popularity terms, but when he passed away, what he did, his legacy, the way he was practicing what he preached and putting his money where his mouth was, really impressed, you know, the world. And that's something that I think we all have the ability to do. Yeah. And all should be doing, really. Yeah. I mean, again, by the strict definition of being a vibrant son, where it comes from, like, you know, a man dealing with the law, you know, not having his father in his life and talking about those things. I don't know too much about Nipsey's background, so I can't necessarily say that he fits. But with the broader perspective of this podcast, the broader philosophy, Nipsey Hussle is definitely one of the most vibrant people that we know, and again, I look up to him, and I hope that a lot of other people find value in his life. And unofficially, I'm going to be reading. I saw somebody put a post up of all the books Nipsey Hussle had read or talked about that he had read. And I'm on my own personal mission to read all of those books. So we may have like a vibrant book club. And anybody who wants to join me, we can definitely, go through that list and read those books together and share that knowledge. And that might be more content for the podcast if you guys are into that. So definitely let me know. But I'm going to be reading those because just looking at the titles and reading some of the synopsis of those books, it really is a lot about leadership and changing the Black community for the better. And I think that there are some very important reads in there. And it kind of gives you insight into what his mindset was really like before he passed.
You might have to... I don't know if you were trying to segue into the IG situation, but this Nipsey might need to get his own like first official Instagram dedication post or something in way of inaugurating a new Instagram that you're trying to unveil. Nipsey might need to be the forefather of that de facto.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We plan on having a lot more interactive content on the Instagram now that we're back. I realized that I was really painting myself into a corner with the Instagram, and it wasn't interactive at all. Like I kind of goofed on the Instagram for a while. So like if anybody is following now, you see that I'm trying to slowly bring in new content so that not only are we talking about what we're doing on this podcast, but we're highlighting some of you guys, some of the listeners, and some of the people in the community, people that I hope to get on this podcast, and people who have inspired this podcast, showing their messages and really highlighting what people are doing and being vibrant in their own lives without me having anything to do with it.
So is this like a celebrity thing, or like just a random people you hear of, or is this like something people can submit their stuff like through DM or something? Or
it's going to be a mixture of all of that. It's going to be things that I see or that I come across because I find those things all the time, and it's going to be celebrity posts because those already get a lot of press, and I want to be able to put my own spin on it. And then there's going to be, if anybody feels like that they want to be featured, then you can always DM me. And it goes the same for being featured on this podcast. I always tell people to reach out to me because I don't know everybody, and there's no way of me. I don't want people to be offended by saying, oh, Javier never hit me up for an interview. Sometimes I just don't know,
Yeah.
So hopefully moving forward, we will be able to feature a lot of people on the Instagram, and it's going to be a much more fun and interactive following. So if anybody has ignored the Instagram before or isn't following, you can follow us on Instagram at @VibrantSons _podcast. And
go ahead and start sending us those submissions too. If you can think of somebody or even yourself that did something vibrant, go ahead and let us know about it. We would love to put you on notice for the good that you've done. Most
definitely. So I think that we've done a pretty good job of kind of talking about everything that we plan on doing, kind of for the most part. We want to restructure the way that this podcast is delivered. I know that through my poll on my Instagram, you guys want a shorter and more direct episodes, and you guys also want to hear a lot more different kind of stories. And we plan on, I hear all of your requests. Don't think that I'm ignoring them. And we plan on implementing those. My goal right now is to give you guys vibrant interviews every other week. And then on those in-between weeks, it may be an episode by myself or with Geoff or maybe another guest. And we go through some of the segments from our previous episodes and just kind of really dissect some more of what it means to be vibrant and give you guys some tips on how you can improve your life and be vibrant within your own life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get lost in my own ramblings, but that makes sense.
That came through. That was good.
Okay. So definitely look out for that. There are a lot of great changes happening to this podcast. I don't want this podcast to be just a reflection of what's going on in my head, but I want this podcast and the platforms that we're on to be a reflection of the entire community. Because I do believe that we are a community within ourselves. We just have to. I have to do better with coordinating the community and be able to get everybody to be able to communicate with each other and be comfortable with communicating with each other, whether that be on my website or on our social media channels. I really want to strengthen this community as much as possible, because I think that there's a lot of power within the messages that we're giving out, and also the people who are listening, because there's a lot of great people who are listening to this podcast that I'm inspired by, and it's humbling to know that they listen to me.
So are you planning on still doing YouTube videos too, or are we just keeping the audio?
Right now, my main focus is going to be the audio and the Instagram, because of just my time constraints, and I want to be able to deliver those as effectively as possible. I felt like when we were doing the YouTube back in the past, I was really spreading myself thin. And now that I have a lot more responsibilities with everything that I'm doing now, I definitely won't have enough time to make the YouTube platform as strong as it could be.
True. Well, since you brought it up, let's get into it. Where you been, bro? Where you been, bro?
Yeah, man.
Detroit out here in D-Town.
Yeah.
With Big Sean in there. Eminem in them.
It really pains me to say that I've been away from this podcast for about a year or so, because this podcast is really the reason why I'm out here doing the work that I'm doing, and has given me the credibility and to a lot more people in order to get these messages out. So I'm really indebted to my listeners and to this podcast for completely transforming the outlook of my life. But a lot has happened in the past year, and that's probably the big elephant in the room is where have I been and why haven't we been delivering episodes for so long? Because I have episodes in the tuck too. Like, I have maybe 4 episodes from back in Atlanta that I never got the chance to release, and I plan on releasing soon some big interviews. But what's been happening is that in this past year, I had a full transition from career paths and locations. Like, I switched from Atlanta to Detroit and went from a career in medicine to a career in education, which is so crazy to me.
It's quite the switch.
Yeah.
Well, you're really in 2 unrelated fields. Like, you can do education, but it's not really related. Well, I guess you are doing science, so it's still kind of related, but
yeah. So
switch from medical practice.
Yeah, I mean, these opportunities kind of just fell in my lap. So let's rewind all the way back. Back when I was recording these episodes, we're gonna put this in reverse. But back when I was recording these episodes in Atlanta, I was living with my parents and really just kind of down and out, really trying to figure out what's going to be my next step, because I was, this podcast came out of a situation where I was applying for medical school, but really lost passion for medicine and applying to medical school across the board, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I felt like it wasn't really my passion, and that I wanted to pursue something else, but I wasn't sure what that something else was. And in that time, I was inspired to do this podcast, and by doing this podcast, networking with more people, and delivering content on a weekly basis, it opened up doors to more speaking engagements, where we touched on in previous episodes, where I was talking, and I was invited back to my old high school to speak. I was invited to other high schools to speak, and up to Detroit to speak with Caught Up and Antoine and everything that he's doing out here with his mentorship group. And in that time, Antoine, he really wanted me to work with him in Detroit. So because of everything I'm doing with the podcast, and he wanted me to work closely with his mentorship group. So he was helping me find a job out here in Detroit, and we came across a school out here in Inkster that was looking to hire more people. mind you, I'm not a teacher. I never planned on being a teacher. And even up to that point, when I was in the interview with these people, I told them, I don't want, I know I don't have the credibility to be a teacher. And they were like, yeah, we don't necessarily want you to be a teacher either, but we want you on our staff because we love the messages that you're putting out. We love, your mission, and we would love to have you not only share that with our kids, but to teach our kids how to start podcasts and to be creative in that way, and to work in their science labs and stuff like that, so that my science degree isn't completely for nothing. But at the same time, I was being vetted by a news publication in Atlanta, and I was going through an interview process with them where I met this guy who worked for news production in Atlanta, and he really loved the podcast. We talked and we met, and we were going to have this podcast basically be produced by this news outlet, and they were going to put it out, and they were going to connect me with more celebrities in Atlanta and be able to get this messaging out on a higher platform. And everything seemed like it was going well. So at this time, I was stuck at a fork in the road. It was like, do I stay in Atlanta and try to put this podcast out with the news company, or do I go to Detroit and spread these messages in the actual community and be in these high schools and really inspire the youth. And
do you start a whole new life? I mean, that's part of the stress too. Do you move a whole new city and start fresh?
Exactly. And so I was really nervous about it. But one thing's for sure is that I didn't want to stay at the job I was at, and I didn't want to go to medical school anymore. So through praying and just circumstances, I ultimately decided to go to Detroit. Part of that was because with the production in Atlanta with the news outlet, everything was going right at first. He loved the idea. He was already thinking of celebrities I can link up with that they can put me in touch with, and he said that it was a message that really personally affected him and some of the people on their staff, and he wanted to get these messages out. But as the talks got further and further, it seemed like there was more of a disconnect, and we weren't talking as often. And when it got up to the decision point where it was like, okay, stay here in Atlanta or go to Detroit, I got a lot more feedback from Detroit. So I was like, I don't even want to take the chance. I want to go out to Detroit and really be with not only this school, but work with Antoine and be hands-on with the community. And hopefully in the future we can get back in touch with this production company and be able to put these messages out on a higher platform if I'm not able to do it on my own,
So do you feel like you could have made it work in Atlanta? Like if you really wanted to, you could have like pushed for that and made something happen? Or you felt like, Detroit was really the only like real option here?
I possibly could have, but at the same time, there were more factors too, where it was like, with the news outlet, we hadn't talked about pay at all yet. And one thing that was for certain was that I wasn't sure that they were going to give me a full-time position, but I knew that I wanted to get out of my parents' house. And because my little brother was going to college, I was like, by the time he's out of the house, I want to be out of the house. And he left to go to school in August, and I left to go to Detroit in August, the week after, which was, answered all my prayers right there. And I was able to get my own apartment, live on my own, and, now I'm out here in Detroit. But, but in that decision to move to Detroit, there was still a lot of faith that went into it. It wasn't like a surefire thing, because when I was moving to Detroit, I packed all my stuff in my car, and I had no idea really where I was going to stay. I didn't have an apartment yet or anything like that, and I wasn't really sure what the position was going to be completely, because they were just saying, we want you on staff in X, Y, and Z, but it's a school, and I'd never worked in education before. So I remember distinctly, with all my stuff packed up, my girlfriend, she stays in Ohio. I drove all the way up to Ohio because it's on the way to Michigan, and I remember, man, just being in her apartment and being in tears, really just like scared, telling her, I'm leaving kind of like a dead end position at my job. I'm afraid of going into another dead end position and just being lost in another state, and it was a real question of faith in that moment where I was just fearful of everything I didn't know about moving and being in a completely new state and in a new career path, unsure of where it might take me.
Yeah, I mean that's a risky thing. I can understand your tears, man. That's stressful.
Yeah. So when I got to Detroit, I remember I pulled up to the orientation at the school with everything in my car, like literally everything I owned in the car, and went straight there from Ohio. Didn't even like find a place or anything. I went straight to the orientation, and we talked and everything. And after the first orientation, I left there and just found an apartment, signed the lease right there. I mean, I looked at it online. It wasn't like I went completely blind, but they showed me the apartment. And I was like, look, if you guys can get me in today, I'm moving in. There's like, I don't care. Like, I didn't really have any options really. So like the first apartment I saw, I signed the lease and I moved in. But from there, working at the school, part of the reason, let me back up just a little bit. Part of the reason why I chose to be in this school, and the reason why I felt like their views aligned with mine, is that this school it's not in Detroit. It's in a suburb right outside of Detroit called Inkster. But there's nothing really suburban about it. It's kind of like, people kind of look at it as like a hood outside of Detroit. And the people here kind of have their own struggles, and if anybody knows, well, I'm sure quite all my listeners know about what's happening in Flint and with the water crisis and how they how they still don't have clean water. But I think that there's people working on that right now. I think that there's money being poured into it now to fix the water situation in Flint.
About time.
Yeah, but for a long time, there wasn't clean water in Flint, and that's a predominantly black community, and there's a whole lot of people who think that it's a racial issue why water, hasn't the whole issue in Flint, why it's a racial issue. I'm sorry, and it's the same thing here in Inkster where. It's not water, but it's education. Where here in Inkster, the state of Michigan shut down all the schools in Inkster, and almost made made it law to not build public schools here in the city at all. Which means that they pretty much turn their back on the community. If there's no public schools, and there's no education, how can you expect the city to thrive? How can you expect the people to better themselves, And not only that, they sold off the land for basically pennies on the dollar to people who would not build schools on the land where the school was before. So, and this is a predominantly black area again. So, it's no coincidence that this is happening in Flint and it's happening here in Inkster. Similar situations, just a different fight,
Right.
So there's the superintendent behind my school is an amazing guy, and I hope to get him on this podcast, hopefully to tell this story better than I'm telling it. He was inspired because he grew up in Inkster, and saw everything that was happening to his community, a black guy, and he wanted his community to have better. So he took it upon himself to create schools in his city again, and to create charter schools. And these are not just ordinary schools. They're putting 21st century furniture in there. They're putting technology like smart boards, touchscreen things like virtual reality, all like interactive labs, augmented reality, like all types of amazing things that they're doing in the school to try to give their students the best that they can receive, not just in education. They're not only bringing education back, but they're trying to bring a better education back, and give these students hope where there wasn't hope before, because this is something that we haven't been able to see in our lives. But I mean, could you only imagine seeing, growing up, and every school that you've been to has kind of been shut down, and you haven't had consistent education throughout your life. You haven't had consistent teachers. You haven't had anyone really keeping track of your progress and holding you accountable towards your education. So these kids were in dire situations, and these are kind of the things that I'm trying to undo with my work there. And I really was inspired by the work that this school is doing, the mission that they're doing behind all their work. And I think that it not only aligns with my podcast, but it aligns with my deeper values,
So when you're with these kids, do you see like the lack of education? Like, does it have a direct effect on them? Like, do you feel like they're missing a lot of things, or are they extra hungry now to get that education, or they got all these extra things in the schools?
Oh man, it's so complex. It's a very complex situation where you do have these kids who want to learn, and they have this motivation because they see what's been happening around them, but at the same time they're conditioned in an area to not really do much, that hasn't done much for them, and they haven't, so they're used to not doing anything, so oftentimes they don't want to do anything. So it's a process of me trying to break down those layers in order to get to the core where they ultimately want to learn. They want to have better for themselves, but on the exterior, they just come to school and they're used to having teachers who don't really care about them, and they're used to having teachers who don't really keep track of their progress or hold them accountable at all. So my role in the classroom ends up being a tough one,
Yeah,
because it's partly motivation, and it's partly making up for all the teaching deficiencies that they've had in the past. We kind of passed over the fact that now I'm a teacher in the school because what happened was, when I first got there, they didn't know what my role was going to be. They had me on paper as a lab assistant to work in their science labs with all their technology that they're doing. But in the short time that I was there, they realized that I have capabilities for so much more, and then also they couldn't find a science teacher. So my superintendent, he came to me and he said, we haven't been able to find a science teacher. I know that you don't have any teaching experience, but would you be up for being, to be our science teacher for the year in our high school? I was supposed to be in the middle school at first, but he was like, we need a high school science teacher. And I was really afraid because I didn't know, I've never been a teacher before, and I never had plans of being a teacher.
High school is mad intimidating. Like, your first teaching job to be in high school is like a little wild.
Yeah, and half of these guys are bigger than I am. So, and way tougher than me too. I can't, hopefully they're not listening to this, but
Don't let them hear this episode. They're gonna try you tomorrow, boy.
But
Mr. Thompson, give me your lunch money.
Oh, and I'll have to. I don't have any choice but to give it to him, really. But they saw, potential in me, and me not wanting to turn down any opportunity. I just said yes. I'm up for it. I know it's going to be a huge learning curve for me. I'm not going to know much, but I'm down for helping out as much as I can. And I partially, it was a promotion, before I even started. Right. So it was like, this is a way for me to really make an impact, get my foot in the door, and show my worth to these people who took a chance on me. And since then, I've slowly become, I'm the only male teacher that they have in the high school. I'm only one of 4 teachers, and I've been one of, and I say this objectively, I don't want to say this like as if I'm coming off proud, but I've been one of the more impactful teachers that they have, where it's, all the things that I'm doing with the kids, and all the things that we've been able to do together. It's really been a great partnership so far. So
do you feel like they look up to you and all that? You feel like you're making any progress with them personally?
Off and on. I mean, it's a love and hate relationship. You know, I think that they respect me, but at the same time, I'm someone who's disrupting the system. The kids are used to not doing anything, so they don't want to do anything. So when I'm coming in here, and I'm disrupting the system, a lot of times, you know, they say, "Oh, you know, you're doing too much. You're doing the most. You know, I don't want to do this. This is too much work." All this stuff like that. And I try to tell them often is that, you know, I don't believe that any of them are stupid, or, you know, any of them have any learning deficiencies. What they've experienced throughout most of their life are teaching deficiencies, and these are teachers who haven't been able to get the content to them in the best ways. And it's a lot for me to take on as a high school teacher now, because I'm teaching science, and if you and science really exposes what you don't know in all your other classes, like, because science incorporates math and reading, critical thinking. So if you can't do those, then science is going to be very hard for you. So those are the types of things that I'm facing, but my biggest goal in my classroom that I've learned is that I try to get my three C's across, because I think high school science, you know, we should be learning a lot, but a lot of people don't really remember much from their high school science classrooms, you know. But the three main takeaways that I try to give to my kids are, I want them to be creative, because I think that scientific thinking should open up your creativity and get you to, actually, let me back up. I think that it should open up your curiosity, because when you're learning about science, it makes you curious about the world around you, and you want to answer all these questions that you may not have had the answers to before. And then secondly, it opens up the creativity, because you have to think creatively on how to answer these questions, and then how to identify other, you know, maybe questions that you have around the world around you. And then the third thing is instilling confidence in my students, because once we've gone through this process of, you know, identifying issues or identifying questions and using the scientific method to answer these questions creatively, now you have this confidence in yourself and your own abilities to take on, you know, different endeavors in your life, and to know that you can achieve. So that's what I try to get across in my classroom, and I think that may not always be. I know that was not the complete focus of science teachers that I've had in the past. A lot of science teachers just try to get you to memorize as much things as possible and try to get you to talk as scientifically as possible. I really just try to focus on instilling those three C's and mixing everything in. Anything else from there is a bonus.
Yeah. So when you started, you were kind of before you started, you were in a very, you know, fearful place, a very unsure place, you know, financially, you know, and in terms of, you know, being in a new place and all that kind of stuff, and doing something new. So what do you say, I guess, where are you at now in terms of how your outlook on where you are and its effect on you and your comfortability? I don't know if that's even a word, but your comfortability in this situation.
Yeah, right now, it's kind of, this is a complex answer as well, where, you know, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I've really found a new passion in education. I think I've unlocked all of the things that I thought that I would get out of medicine in teaching, where, you know, I'm using the scientific knowledge because I'm passionate about science. But ultimately, you know, I had to address, why was I even pushed to do medicine in the first place? What was my objective in doing medicine? And ultimately, it came from all the altruistic reasons for doing medicine, where it's, you know, I want to better people, their health. I want to educate them about how they can improve their lifestyles, and I just want to improve the lives of people around me. And use my creative thinking in that. But when I was studying for medicine and all that stuff, I didn't feel like my creativity was being utilized in medicine. Other people may feel like their creative abilities may come out in medicine, but mine weren't. And when I'm in the classroom, I can be as creative as I want to be. I can and all those other whys are still intact. It's like, I'm empowering these students. I'm educating them about, how they can improve themselves, and connecting them with opportunities, so in that way they can do better, and opening their eyes to a whole new world, and just kicking back that knowledge. The things that I give on my podcast, I'm giving to them. And one of my things for even starting this podcast, one of my whys for starting this podcast, was to make mental health conversations accessible and cool to younger minority communities. And I feel like I'm doing that on a daily basis with my students in my classroom, and so that's why I'm so passionate about teaching now, even though it's so different from where I was before. And but it's hard to say that if I'll stick with it, and make my full career out of it, because I'm brand new to it, and there's still a lot of things that I got to figure out, But as for right now, the time that I have with education, the passion that is opening up inside of me, working in these communities, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I look, I was in a situation before where I hated going to work every day, and I was actively looking for another job. Where here, when I'm going to work, it doesn't feel like work on most days, and I look forward to being in the classroom. I feel like I'm with family when I go and visit these students and these kids, and talk to them about their lives, and try to educate them as much as I can.
Yeah, it sounds like you found an addition to your why. You already kind of had, an idea of who you were as a person, but, for whatever reason, I guess the goals that you thought would be the best goals for you, or maybe even the goals that you were trying to live through for someone else's sake, you kind of negotiated your why. But embracing, the things about yourself that you love the most, and embracing the parts of yourself that you truly wanted to be represented to people, you found more than what you were looking for. Like, I'm sure why you were scared being a teacher initially was because you didn't think you had it in you. You didn't know how to do it, and you didn't really want to, you were kind of just scared to explore that. But now that you've done it, you're really, like you said, you're being as creative as you want to be. You're opening up the part of you that you've always really wanted to open, and that part is only growing. So,
yeah,
for me, the takeaway from that is, like, no matter. And this is actually something, I started working a corporate job recently, and I had my boss came in, my big boss came in, like the director of the department came in and talked to us, and she was telling us to embrace the things about us that, we're good at, embrace the things about us that we love and stuff. And personally, that I never really identified with that, because I always thought, you need to work on the things about yourself that you're not good at, you need to get better at your weaknesses, all that kind of stuff. But she was saying how, that's gonna be what empowers you not only to do what you want to do, but to continue being good at, and successful at life. And, it makes sense. And, my whole life, I've kind of ran from the idea of the things that make me the most comfortable, because I just want to be better at my weaknesses. But really embracing that side of you that says, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm good at, this is what I like doing, this is what I'm going to keep doing, is what allows you to build on that why, allows you to find that reason why you're doing it, allows you to feel empowered. And, it makes you better, and helps, make other people around you better, especially when you're adding your ideas of how you can contribute to your community into that. So, that's something that's important for all of us. I think that we can all take away from it is, how can I add on to my why? Not just what is my why, but how can I continue to grow it? How can I continue to build on that why? Because, there's always more work to do, for sure, on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you're saying, about finding your why and improving on your why, we can bring it back to this podcast where, well, before that, my why, like I already stated, was transfer from medicine to here, to education, because ultimately I want to inspire the communities. But also my why with this podcast, you want to hone in on why you're doing things, and when you do identify those things like you're saying and improve on those, you create a much better product. With this podcast, is my why am I doing this podcast? Is it to inspire my immediate community and to be the best example I can possibly be? Or is it to get 1 million followers, or a million subscribers? So if my reason for doing this isn't to necessarily be the biggest podcaster in the world, then I can be okay with what I'm doing, you know, and find more confidence in the work that I'm doing and not be so worried about the numbers, you know. And when you really hone in on your true reasonings and your why behind your whole purpose and your work, then that also, one important thing is that it eliminates all competition from all your work that you're doing, and it only fosters collaboration, you know. Because before, when I first started this podcast, my why kind of got, you know, fuzzy, and in the midst of me, you know, gaining a lot of followers and a lot of people and attraction to the podcast, I was so worried about, oh, how many people are listening to this episode, and it got focused on that, and how well is my podcast doing compared to other people's podcasts. And I got lost where I should really be focused on how can I be optimizing my platform so that the people who are listening get the most out of it, you know. And that moved me to a space of less of me being an inspiration and more of me being competitive, and it's best to get away from that competitive spirit and really try to open up to collaboration, because, you know, I can see someone doing better than me, and the competitive side of me may get insecure or may get mad at them and say, oh man, you know, they're doing way better than me, and I may resent them. But if I'm looking at my why, you know, my reason is, you know, I want to inspire as many people as possible, so then that would inspire me to want to collaborate with that person, try to reach out to their audience, or try to get my audience to, and if they're doing great things, connect my audience to their audience. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who these messages are coming from, as long as they're getting out, you know. I remember watching The Shop on HBO and seeing everything that LeBron was talking about on HBO, and literally being in my room pissed off because I was like, yo, like, and seeing what people are saying on Twitter, like, oh man, LeBron is so inspiring, what he's doing on HBO is so cool. And I'm like, yo, like, these are the same people who don't listen to my podcast. I'm like, don't you see, like, you know, I'm doing the same things, and it's all about me. But really, and I had to take a step back, and, you know, it's not about me. I don't care if I'm the big face of this. All that matters is that these messages are getting out. And, you know, now that mental health and people talking about mental health is getting so saturated, I may not be the main spokesperson for, you know, these types of conversations, because so many people have come out in the time that we've been away. And since we've started this podcast, it was taboo when we first started, but now we see so many celebrities touching on it now, you know. So, and part of me can get upset by that, but part of me is, you know, but now I've gotten to a space where I'm just comfortable with the fact that these messages are getting out. And I'm glad that, you know, because originally we wanted celebrities to talk about this. This was our main focus, you know, trying to get people like Kanye West, J. Cole, and Jay-Z to talk about these things. And then now they're talking about it. J. Cole had a full interview with Angie Martinez talking about his upbringing, and he even talked to Lil Pump about what his upbringing was like, and they were talking about how they had shared experiences. So it makes me happy to know that more black people and more people in the hip-hop community specifically are talking about these things, because this is the community that inspired me, and I want to give back to this community as much as possible. And I really inspire other people to find their whys and their reason behind it, so in that way you can inspire people and be a vibrant son in wherever you are.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful.
No, I mean, you summed it all up. I mean, I was going to try to add on to that, but I think for me, dang, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, but I guess the more you think about the value in what you're doing, and I guess centralizing your focus on your why, you know, it definitely increases your need for collaboration and decreases your focus on competition. And I think it also does that, you know, decreases the competition with yourself. And, like, I guess the fear of evaporation, and the fear that, like, that this isn't going to make any imprint. No one's going to care. I'm not going to make any money. I'm not going to be able to survive, you know. And I mean, I'm sure most people I think of when they think of, like, being a doctor or even just being, like, a businessman or being whatever, like, a lot of it has to do with the nice chunk of change that you get from that. And, you know, it may not be the main reason why someone would try and think about doing it, but it's definitely part of the process. But it's just amazing how, personally, when you focus on that special thing that empowers your community and makes you happy at the same time because it's, you know, what you feel like you were brought on earth to do. It really eliminates all that fear of, I may not be able to make enough money to survive off of this, or, you know, like when I was younger, I used to really want to be in like journalism, and I wanted to be a writer and everything, and I was really focused on that part of my life, and I was, you know, doing internships and stuff, and thinking I was going to go that way, and then the more I started talking to my parents, I was like, oh, you know, they're like, you need to go to pharmacy school, because I was working in a pharmacy, and all the people in the pharmacy were saying I was good at it, so I was like, they're like, oh, you should go, so, you know, I did eventually end up going, but, you know, now I'm not in pharmacy school anymore, and it's kind of forced me to be in a position to think about, you know, well, what is the reason I'm really doing this? Am I doing it for clout, as Cardi B and Offset would say, or am I doing this because this is, you know, my why, and this is how I want to affect people? And of course, being a pharmacist, you know, definitely allowed me to think about helping people in a different way and being hands-on with healthcare, and I did enjoy that aspect of it, but there was a lot of things about it that really didn't fulfill me, didn't really move me, and you know. And I had to realize, you know, for me, I was really thinking about how am I going to provide for my family in the future? What's the easiest way to get to this check? And because I've been in the pharmacy for so long, it had just been kind of something that I had thought about and made the most sense. But, you know, when you get there, it's like, wow, is this really what it's going to be like?
Yeah.
Of course, with the harsh reality of consideration. And I was so afraid of not making it anywhere else. The idea of being a journalist, people had gotten into my head that, you know, you're going to make, at the most, you're going to make $50,000 a year, and that's it. And I couldn't imagine that being my cap, so I had to bail. Yeah. But, you know, now, I'm not even thinking about going back into journalism now, but I am just, you know, thinking about what I truly want to do. And, of course, your finances and stuff is something you want to think about, but when you're just focused on, like, now I'm in a position where I'm, you know, better off, for sure, than I thought I would be at this point. And it's a lot. I'm in a space where now I can focus on what I'm truly doing. And when I got to that space, everything else kind of just started falling into place. Like, I didn't really have to worry as much as I thought I needed to about, you know, how I would be taken care of and how I would be taking care of people. You know, first of all, God's always got me no matter what. And second of all, when you put your energy into the right things, you know, it's interesting how things just kind of fall into place for you and things just kind of work out and things get taken care of. So, you know, it's important. Just don't worry about how it's going to happen. You just need to know that you need to push forward and make it happen, and for the right reasons, for your own personal, meaningful, impactful why.
Exactly. And man, you said so much, and I really wish that we can touch on it, you know, even more, and we will in the future, possibly in the next episode. But I know that people really wanted a shorter podcast, and we're approaching an hour now.
Yes.
So we're gonna wrap it up, but I really want to continue that conversation in the future, because I think that it's an important conversation that we should be having about where should your wife, you know, what should come first, how much you make or your true passion in life, you know, and how that has affected the moves that we've made in our own lives. So we'll definitely be touching on that in the future, but where this podcast is going, I'm really inspired by it, and I'm really inspired by the people who have given their feedback to me, and want to see this podcast be the best that it can. And ultimately, you know, I want to focus on this community that we're building, instead of focusing on how to bring more people in. You know, I want to cater to the people who love this podcast and want to see it grow, and we can help each other out as much as we possibly can. So I'm putting you guys first. I want to inspire all of you guys to be vibrant sons and leaders in your own lives, vibrant sons and daughters, and vibrant SUNS, and then, you know, hopefully inspire everybody to follow their own whys and to be able to develop that. And if you guys have any other questions, you know, you can always find us at Vibrant Sons _podcast on Instagram. You can always email me at vibrantsons@gmail.com. There's so many ways that you can reach out to me. Go on vibrantsons.com to to find links to all the websites and everything. That would probably be the easiest way to get in touch with us, or to find all the links to everything else. You can always subscribe to us. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Play, we're all over the place now. There's so many points of access, so we really want to make this the best platform, not only for ourselves but for you guys as well. Do you have anything to add to that?
Nah, man, I was thinking about putting my personal stuff out there, but I'm like, that's not appropriate. So I'm good.
No, we're gonna tag you, man. Everybody's gonna you'll be able to see Geoff's information in the liner notes, show notes for this podcast, and we'll tag him on the Instagram. So in that way, you may personalize more with Geoff and instead of me, and that's okay. You guys can definitely reach out to him. I trust him with my community as well. Anybody that I put on this podcast, I want to do a better job of vetting them, making sure that not only I want to make sure that I can trust them with this platform, and also that they can bring value to each one of my listeners, and not just for clout or anything like that. So again, thank you so much. If you made it this far in the podcast, I love you. Geoff loves you.
Thanks.
And we're a few minutes past an hour, so please don't hate me. We'll be back next week.
We tried.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll talk to you. Bye.